Manchester City moving ahead of Manchester United and Arsenal for Elliot Anderson is the sort of story people shrug at right before it turns into a very expensive lesson. One club looks like it is building the next midfield line early, while another is being offered the fantasy of Aurelien Tchouameni through a Jadon Sancho side plot that still feels like transfer algebra with missing numbers. Chelsea are back in the managerial spin cycle, and Liverpool have an Alisson story hanging over them without the comfort of clean answers. Skip the next few minutes and you miss the real pattern. Some of these headlines are plans, some are pressure leaks, and a few smell like pure theater. Back with Just Soccer, and the main tension is simple. Serious clubs solve midfield issues before they become a crisis. That is why we start with Manchester City and Elliot Anderson. Start with a move that sounds quiet on the surface but says a lot underneath. Manchester City do not usually wander into midfield races for decoration. Man City in pole position to sign Elliot Anderson this summer. This is exactly the type of report casual viewers dismiss because the name is not wrapped in superstar glitter. Those are often the signings that keep top sides ahead while everyone else waits for a dramatic reveal. If Manchester City are genuinely leading here, the most important part is not beating Manchester United and Arsenal to a headline. It is that the club may already be working on the next midfield layer before the current one starts to creak. Sky Sports reports that Manchester City are in pole position to sign Nottingham Forest midfielder Elliot Anderson this summer, with interest also mentioned from Manchester United and Arsenal. That is the factual base. No fee is confirmed, no contract length is confirmed, and the transfer is not done. But the report still matters because it places City at the front of a competitive Premier League chase. There is a reason stories like this deserve more respect than the usual shiny name rumor. Elite squads keep control by refreshing important areas early, especially in midfield, where the difference between one more technical option and one stale season can be enormous. Manchester City have built a reputation for making these moves look obvious only after the player is already inside a system that flatters his strengths and punishes everyone else. The caution is clear enough. Being in pole position in June or July can mean very little once the market gets noisy and rival clubs start waving larger promises around. Still, if this report holds, Manchester City are not just shopping. They are trying to win the next tactical argument before Manchester United and Arsenal even finish writing theirs. That takes us from a grounded midfield link to one of the flashier stories of the day, and this is where transfer season starts wearing too much cologne. Jadon Sancho to help Man United sign Aurelien Tchouameni, reported. Aurelien Tchouameni is the kind of name that can raise supporter mood in 10 seconds flat. That is also why people need to read these stories with one eyebrow up rather than both arms in the air. The Jadon Sancho angle makes this especially slippery. When one unresolved problem is suddenly framed as the possible key to unlocking another huge move, it can be real reporting or it can be football dressing uncertainty up as clever strategy. A Google News transfer roundup via footballtransfers.com frames Jadon Sancho as a possible factor in a Manchester United pursuit of Aurelien Tchouameni. The wording matters. Possible factor is not the same as a swap being agreed, and it is not the same as Sancho definitely being offered as part of any deal. There are no confirmed bid details in the source package either. That leaves a story with obvious appeal and obvious fragility. Tchouameni is mentioned as a Manchester United target, and Sancho is tied into the wider conversation around how such a pursuit might even be approached. Supporters will understand why that catches fire. Manchester United have needed more control and authority in midfield often enough that almost any elite name in that zone will sound like oxygen. But this is where football news turns theatrical. A glamorous target can make a club look more coherent than it really is, and an awkward player situation can suddenly be recast as a useful negotiating chip. Reports suggest there is a connection in the conversation, they do not prove a breakthrough, and they definitely do not turn a complicated chase into a solved equation. From transfer theater to the Stamford Bridge weather report, where calm skies remain a rare and suspicious event, Chelsea are back in the managerial conversation again, which says plenty on its own. Chelsea considering 3 next manager candidates to replace Liam Rosenior after sacking. The revealing part is not that there are 3 candidates, the revealing part is how quickly Chelsea are once more discussing the next man after a sacking, because the cycle has become the story. Supporters can argue about whether the next appointment should be experienced or long-term. The harder truth is that no coach looks stable when the structure above him behaves like it drinks 3 espressos before breakfast. Football London reports that Chelsea are considering 3 candidates for the next manager role after Liam Rosenior's sacking. The package frames this as replacement planning ahead of the end of the season, which tells you the club are already moving into succession mode rather than allowing any real pause for reflection. What we do not have is a confirmed appointment, a signed agreement, or a final decision on who gets the job. That distinction matters because managerial shortlist stories can become fan fiction at frightening speed. One name gets linked, supporters project a style, and suddenly a whole future is being debated off a report that only says the club are considering options. Chelsea's deeper problem is not a shortage of candidates, it is credibility. Every new search asks players, agents, and supporters to believe that this time there is a stable idea behind the motion. Until the clubs show that the environment can stop changing every few months, any shortlist will carry the same risk. It looks like planning from a distance and panic when you zoom in. If Chelsea are wrestling with leadership, Liverpool supporters are staring at a different kind of discomfort. Goalkeeper rumors do not feel like ordinary noise because they hit the part of the team fans trust to keep the whole thing upright. Fabrizio Romano drops transfer update on Alisson reported. Stories around a number one goalkeeper create a special kind of anxiety. People are not only thinking about replacing a player, they are thinking about whether an era is moving faster than expected. That is why careful wording matters so much here. A transfer update can be significant without being close to final, and football coverage gets itself into trouble every time it confuses movement with certainty. A Google News item referencing Fabrizio Romano via Yardbarker discusses a transfer update involving Alisson and frames it as a story Liverpool supporters may not enjoy. That is the reliable limit of the supplied evidence. There is no confirmed agreement, no confirmed destination club, and no confirmed bid detail in the package provided here. So the honest reading is a restrained one. There is enough smoke for the story to travel, but not enough in the evidence to declare that Alisson is on the verge of leaving Liverpool. That may be less satisfying than the louder versions online, but accuracy matters most when the player in question is a goalkeeper of this stature. Elite clubs do not treat that position lightly, and supporters should not be pushed into panic by half-built conclusions. Still, even the existence of the story has weight. Alisson is not just another starter. He is part of Liverpool's security system, part of the leadership spine, and part of the reason bad defending has not looked even worse at certain moments. Reports suggest a discussion around his future is alive. They do not justify pretending the exit door is already open. Now for a rumor that feels active and incomplete at the same time, which is always a dangerous combination. Arsenal are linked to Williams, but the evidence supplied stops frustratingly short of telling us which Williams. Arsenal ramp up interest in Williams rumor. This is a good test of whether people actually respect evidence or just enjoy the costume of certainty. If the reporting cannot firmly identify the player beyond the surname, then anyone speaking like the whole deal is mapped out is performing confidence, not reporting. Even so, a line about Arsenal ramping up interest is not meaningless. Clubs do not become attached to that kind of language by accident unless someone wants the market to feel a little warmer. An ESPN attributed Google News transfer rumor roundup says Arsenal have ramped up interest in a player with the surname Williams. The major limitation is obvious and important. The supplied evidence does not identify the full name or the current club, so there is no safe basis here for inventing either one. That lack of precision makes the story awkward, but not worthless. The phrase ramped up interest suggests a change in temperature rather than a static background check. It implies Arsenal are being portrayed as more active than before, which can mean anything from stronger internal approval to external market testing. What it does not mean is that a bid is confirmed or that a contract is close. This is exactly where transfer coverage becomes a playground for assumptions. Supporters want to leap straight to role, fee, and tactical fit, yet the cleanest version of the truth is still the narrow one. Arsenal are reportedly showing stronger interest in a player known here only as Williams, and the missing identification is not a small detail. It is the detail. Not every important football story involves a transfer chase or a boardroom whisper. Some stories tell you more about the game around the pitch than the game on it, and this is one of them. Football Focus to end after 52 years. The end of Football Focus after 52 years is more than a schedule change. It says something uncomfortable about what football media now rewards and what it no longer protects. There is a little dark comedy in it as well. The sport has endless clips, alerts, rumor accounts, and fake urgency every hour, yet a long-running institution can still be waved out of the room when the numbers say move on. British Broadcasting Corporation Sport has announced that Football Focus will end after 52 years. This is not a transfer story, not an injury story, and not a hidden contract twist pretending to be cultural news. It is a straight media story, and it deserves to be treated that way. That does not make it small. Football Focus was part of the weekly rhythm for generations, and 52 years is not an ordinary lifespan in modern sports broadcasting. Viewers can debate whether the format still match current habits, but there is no point pretending this is just another line item in a scheduling sheet. A piece of football television history is ending. The broader point is harder to ignore. Football culture keeps moving toward faster reaction, louder packaging, and an endless chase for the next spike of attention. Against that backdrop, the end of a show like Football Focus feels less like an isolated decision and more like another sign that legacy loses badly when it has to compete with pure velocity. Back to the pitch, because while transfer chatter steals the spotlight, league positions are quietly deciding the size of summer ambitions. Europe is not decoration, Europe is leverage. The race for Europe, which English clubs can qualify, how, and who needs what. This is the kind of story people treat as administrative until the consequences land on their club's budget and recruitment pitch. European qualification changes the tone of an entire summer before anyone signs a contract. The modern qualification picture is so tangled that clubs can spend weeks speaking like contenders, while one bad result leaves them hunting permutations like accountants in a storm. The Guardian frames the places up for grabs in UEFA competitions next season as a movable feast, with plenty of intrigue still alive late in the campaign. That description lands because qualification is no longer a simple, tidy ladder. League finishes, cup outcomes, and conditional routes can leave several clubs in suspense right until the final day. For English clubs, the stakes are brutally practical. Champions League football changes the level of player a club can realistically attract. Europa League and Conference League spots alter squad planning, rotation, and fixture pressure. Miss Europe entirely, and suddenly the sales pitch sounds weaker, the budget looks tighter, and every transfer negotiation becomes a little more awkward. That is why this belongs in a transfer-led show. The market does not only follow money, it follows status, timing, and the credibility of the project. European qualification works like truth serum. It tells players how serious the next season may be, and it tells clubs how expensive their recent mistakes are about to become. And in France, the table is offering a classic football trap. Paris Saint-Germain have the edge, but the calendar is standing there with a grin and a hammer. PSG have the edge in the league on title race, but face 7 matches in 23 days. Fixture congestion is where title favorites stop being judged by aura and start being judged by legs, concentration, and depth. 7 matches in 23 days can expose weaknesses that reputation usually hides. Marquinhos' warning that the title is still in play matters because it cuts against the lazy assumption that Paris Saint-Germain only need to show up. In stretches like this, famous squads can look alarmingly ordinary. The Guardian reports that Paris Saint-Germain's win against Nantes gave them a 4-point lead on Lens, but also left them facing 7 matches in 23 days. Marquinhos said the title is still in play and Lens are not giving up, which is exactly the sort of message a dressing room sends when it knows the lead is real but far from safe. A 4-point cushion sounds healthy until the schedule starts draining recovery time and sharpening every small mistake. One careless draw and the mood changes. Another slip and a title race that looked manageable suddenly feels like an open wound. That is what heavy fixture runs do. They turn comfort into tension at frightening speed. For Paris Saint-Germain, this next stretch is not about brand power or expensive names. It is about rotation, discipline, and whether the squad can resist the old temptation to play as if the badge should settle everything. The lead over Lens exists. So does the risk buried inside that schedule. That is the day on Just Soccer. Manchester City look like a club trying to solve tomorrow before it becomes a problem. Manchester United are attached to a glamorous Aurelien Tchouameni story that still needs heavy skepticism. Chelsea are searching for managerial stability in a place that treats stability like a seasonal accessory. Liverpool have an Alisson update without clean certainty. Arsenal have interest in a Williams rumor that still lacks basic identification. Football Focus is ending after 52 years, and the races for Europe and the Ligue 1 title are quietly shaping what comes next. The loudest headline is not always the truest one. Watch who is building with clarity, who is leaking for leverage, and who is hoping the noise buys them time they probably do not have.